Hello and welcome to lesson 13 as we continue to look at phrases or words that we should not be using, and this is the next phrase that I want you to avoid. I would appreciate it. Let's find out why. Okay, as you can see behind me, there are many reasons why we should not be using this structure, so let me talk you through them one by one. The first and main reason is that when people use this, I would appreciate it, what they're really trying to do is to ask a question. But the problem is I would appreciate it is not a question form. So you're trying to use some language to do a job, but that language isn't designed for that job. But we have other language forms, for example, indirect question forms, which are designed to do that job. So we should be using indirect question forms instead and not taking other areas of language, other vocabulary, and try to make that do the job. As a matter of fact, when we are using I would appreciate it, what you're doing really is you're asking for help. You're saying to someone, help me out. Do me a favour. Do something nice for me. You're not asking a question at all. But people will say, okay, it's polite. And yes, it is polite. But the problem is, it's not a polite way to ask a question. And so as a result, you're not asking a question. You're just saying, help me out, do me a favour. And so as a result, it can be ignored. If I write to someone and I say to them, will you help me out? I would appreciate it if whatever it might be. Then that person could just simply say, no, they don't want to help me out, and say they won't help me out. But if I ask a concrete question, indirect question form, here it's very clear. I am writing to you because I need you to do something and respond in a certain way. And I would appreciate it is not the tool to do that. An indirect question form is. And now we go into the reasons that we've seen already in other lessons. So when you are writing this structure, when you're using this structure, you're asking the reader to work out what the message is. You're asking the reader to work out who has to do the action. And if you're using this with a passive form, as we'll see in a second, then you really are asking the reader to do a lot of work which the reader should not have to do. This is something that should be clear straight away to the reader, so the reader doesn't have to waste time. The reader has less possibility to misinterpret or misunderstand the message, and then as a result, if you use the correct forms, your writing, your email will be more successful. Now, I talked about the passive form, but I would appreciate whatever ... or I would appreciate it can be used in many, many different grammar forms. So that means you can see it in lots of different places, and you can make it do lots of different things within the area of English grammar. So you will see it everywhere. And so this is the problem. And I haven't written it on here because there's not enough room to do that, is just because other people do this, particularly native speakers, particularly your business colleagues, does not mean it is okay. Just because they are making a mistake and they are not writing successful emails or they are not asking questions properly does not mean that you have to copy them. And just think about what I've said there. Just because they are not writing successfully does not mean that you also don't have to write successfully. You should look at that writing and you should see of your peers, of the people that you're writing to, and you should say to yourself with confidence, I can write better than they can because I am not using this structure. But the main point, and I've underlined it here, Don't make your readers do the work of the writer. Okay, let's have a look at an example to show you all of those points that I've just mentioned. What we've got here is a sentence, I would appreciate it if this invoice is paid. So we have the structure we don't want to use, followed by a passive form. Now, let's have a look at the proper message, what we really mean to say. Could you please pay this invoice? Okay, now let's compare the two. Which one is actually asking the question? It's the indirect question form. The example, I would appreciate it, is not asking a question. Which one is identifying someone that has to do something? It's the second one. It's the indirect question form. Could you do something? In the example sentence with I would appreciate it if, we are not identifying anyone who should be doing anything. So this is a mystery. In which example are we stating clearly what has to happen? It's the second one. Could you please what? Pay this invoice. Compare that to the example sentence. I would appreciate it if this invoice is paid. It's very abstract. It's not very specific. It's very loose, for want of a better word. It is not a precise way of communicating an action that's got to be done. So what you're doing then, if you say, I would appreciate it if the invoice is paid, you're basically saying, okay, here's my message to you. Now you go and do something with this. You react in some way. In other words, you're asking the reader to do, you interpret this and you do all of the work, which is something we should not be doing. Okay, so what are the messages you should take away? Firstly and mainly, don't use I would appreciate it if unless you actually are asking for help or asking for a favour. I would appreciate it if is a piece of language. It's perfectly correct. It is a language tool, but that language tool has a particular purpose. So use it for that purpose. Use it to ask a favour. Use it to ask for some help. Don't use it to do something which that language tool is not suitable for. In other words, asking a question. Instead, use a proper indirect question form. Could you please, would you please, please could you, please would you, etc., etc. And I said this a few seconds ago, but it's worth highlighting it again because I know that lots of non-native speakers will say this. Everyone else does it. It's not an excuse in my book. Natives use it is also not an excuse in my book. As I said, just because they're doing something badly, which they are, doesn't mean that you have to copy that bad example and also do something badly. Okay, time for some questions. What I would like you to do is I would like you to read the 5 sentences below and use the correct indirect question form to actually ask the question which is behind that text. So, for example, and I'll have a look at that same example, I would appreciate it if the invoice or this invoice is paid, really is saying, could you please pay this invoice? Okay, think about those sentences, those questions below. Once you do those answers, or once you do those questions, and you've got your answers, then have a look at my suggested answers video and compare your answers to mine.